Hello there, ladies and gents. Welcome to today's video. My name is Marcos Aguirre, and in today's video, I'm going to review, document, and sound demo this really cool guitar. This is a Jackson RR24m Pro. Let's get right into the specs and features of this beautiful instrument. So out of the factory, these guitars came with the Floyd Rose Original, a single EMG 81 on the bridge, a single volume/tone knob, a maple fretboard, 24 extra jumbo frets, a 25.5-inch scale length, a 43mm nut, an Elder body, and Jackson branded tuners. There's another version of this guitar out there in which the colors are reversed except for the fretboard, but the problem with white Jacksons is that they turn yellow if you so much as look at them wrong, so this is definitely the better version. If you guys have seen my other videos, you guys know that I love Japanese RR24s, with my favorites being those that have the design made famous by Alexi Laiho and Rope Latvala. And the RR24m, even though aesthetically it's very different from those guitars, essentially it's the same guitar. It's got the same specs, it's got the same pickup configuration, and the same country of manufacturer. So it's basically one of those guitars in a different outfit. And honestly, even though aesthetically it's different, it looks really, really cool. I dig the whole black and white theme to it. And it looks to be, in part because it was made in Japan, to be an excellent quality instrument. Also in part because this guitar was made in an era where Jackson, at least the Fender-owned Jackson, was at the top of their game in terms of what they give you and what build quality they did on their guitars. Whereas today they'll charge twice as much as they did for this guitar and not even give you a Floyd Rose original, give you a Floyd Rose 1000, but I digress. The standout feature on these RR24Ms, which make them unique among the other RR24s, is that they have a maple fretboard with what I believe to be black acrylic inlay material. Whereas like all the other R24s seem to have an ebony fretboard with either pearloid or mother of pearl inlay. And the fretboard on this guitar looks to be a really good quality fretboard. The color is very uniform, and even though you can still see the grain, it just looks to be a really good fretboard with no signs of cracking or anything like that. Keep in mind that this guitar was made in the late 2000s, so the fact that it stayed in this good of shape with just a little bit of maintenance shows how good the quality is on this guitar. The back of this guitar doesn't have anything crazy going on, so you've got your standard Jackson tuners. The back of the neck is painted, and on the right here we have our cavities for electronics, the tremolo, and for the battery for the EMG 81, which is active. If you guys see that the strap-ons are missing, that's because I was changing them out when I filmed this, so obviously it didn't come from the factory like that. One thing that's appreciated on these guitars that's not done by Jackson anymore is that the pinstripes or bevels are present on the back, which is something Jackson doesn't do anymore unless you get a custom shop RR24. Believe it or not, this guitar does have binding, but you have to be really eagle-eyed to catch it because it's obscured by the fact that the neck is painted the same color. So I'll try to show it for you guys here. I'll try to zoom in and get an angle where you guys can see it, but you really have to look for it to find it. That little line you guys see there, that's not something you can feel with your fingers or anything like that. So it's not damaged, it's just the way the paint turned out under the lacquer coat on the headstock. Either way, although obscure, black binding on this guitar looks cool. But what do you guys think? Would this guitar have looked better if it had a white binding? So I'm the second owner of this particular guitar. The original owner was an older guy, so he bought this guitar when it first came out in the late 2000s, kept it on its case for about 10 years, and then sold it to me. He did bang it up just once, and it has that damage, but outside of that, the guitar is basically new. Again, Jackson uses a white paint formula that turns yellow very quickly, so you can use that as a frame of reference to see how well kept a Jackson guitar has been, and it's very exemplified with this guitar and how white the bevels are. Now, I bought this guitar a few years ago for $1,500 from that guy I mentioned earlier. I ended up selling this guitar for $1,000 recently, which it kind of sucked to have sold it at a loss, but you know that's just business. You win some, you lose some. However, I did keep the hardshell case that came with this guitar, so it wasn't a total loss. From what I found on the internet, it seemed like these guitars were about $1,000 new when they first came out, and then you could find them in the used market from like $700 to $900, which nowadays you would pay like $2,000 for one of these guitars because they're in short supply and high demand. And of course, like the newer Jackson RR24s don't quite have the same specs that these guitars did. Alright, let's get into the tone test demo. For this demo, I'm going to be using my Elite Jackson setup, and everything you guys hear will be through my iPhone. I'm not going to use any fancy microphones or anything like that. For a lot of these tone test videos, my philosophy is if it sounds good just being recorded on the phone, then it's going to sound all that much better in person. Let's get right into it. Okay, guys, so after having owned and played this guitar for a few years, I can say it's an excellent guitar. It feels great to hold and play. It does take some getting used to because the neck is a little wider and a little chunkier than most guitar necks,
but after you get used to it, again, it's an excellent guitar. It has an excellent tuning stability, and I'm sure having a Floyd Rose original has a lot to do with that. It feels great to play even when you're playing it standing up, but admittedly, it does have a little bit of neck dive because the neck is a little chunkier, but it's not bad by any means. And also, having a chunkier neck, I believe, contributes to the tuning stability because a bigger piece of wood is less likely to warp or shift versus a thin one. The EMG sounds like you would expect, like an EMG, so good but not great and very generic. If I had kept this guitar, I would have definitely changed the pickup for an EMG Alexi or something like that. So final thoughts on this guitar. In terms of feel and comfort, I give it a 9 out of 10. So it feels great to hold and play. The only thing that keeps it back from being a perfect 10 out of 10 is the fact that the back of the neck is painted, so your hand does get sticky if you play for it after a while because of the sweat in your palms, as well as it does have a little bit of neck dive, so that's the only downside of that. In terms of construction, I give this guitar a 9 out of 10, and I know I've bragged about the construction of this guitar throughout the whole video. The only thing that keeps it from being a 10 out of 10 is that the routing cavities are a little bit rough, and I forgot to film that before I sold this guitar, so I apologize if I don't have footage of that. But again, that's the only thing that keeps the construction of this guitar from being a 10 out of 10. In terms of sound, I give this guitar an 8. So the EMG 81 just sounds like an EMG 81. And in terms of hardware and electronics, I give this guitar a 9 out of 10. Obviously, the Floyd Rose original carries the team in that department, but the Jackson tuners are a little bit cheap in my opinion. It would have been nice to have had like Goto tuners, even if they were non-locking or anything like that. But it doesn't make too much of a difference because at the end of the day, the strings are locked at the nut. So again, even though you get cheap tuners, it's not a big deal. So I think a 9 out of 10 in that department is fair. In terms of aesthetic, and keep in mind that aesthetic or looks is 100% subjective, so it's different for everybody. But this is my outlook on this guitar. I give this guitar a 9 out of 10. I think it looks beautiful. I think the maple fretboard was a good idea, but it does look a little bit, yellow in contrast with like the black and white of the rest of the guitar. Not to say that it looks bad, but it does take away just a little bit from the black and white theme to it. And also the fact that the paint formula turns yellow over time. The bevels are eventually going to turn yellow, which won't look too bad on this guitar. It might just match the maple fretboard, but that's not something that I like in my guitars. If I buy a guitar that's white, I want it to stay white. So 9 out of 10 is the rating I give it for aesthetic. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching and for your support. If you guys have questions, comments, concerns relating to this guitar, drop them in the comment section. Besides that, you guys stay safe, happy Thanksgiving, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.